Yeah, hello, and welcome to the Wednesday episode 902 of Stand Up, where I welcome Professor Eric Segall of Georgia State. In high demand, glad he had some time for me. He's a Georgia State law professor. Of course, this big indictment that came down last night was in Fulton County, Georgia, so he and a few others are in a lot of more demand than even some of the other legal experts. Of course, it has a lot to do with constitutional law, not just criminal law. Great conversation with Segall, as always. Many of you wanted to hear from him. I got him. I've got some great clips, analysis, other analysis to play for you as well. A couple news stories before I get to that, but hey, I told you this week was going to be a little weird over 3 weeks ago, knowing I was going to be coming back from my vacation in Australia and then immediately picking up my daughters at camp and then dropping my oldest, Ava, 18, off at Ithaca College on Thursday. And so that's the deal, and it's been really hard week. It's been hard to focus, hard to get anything done, just thinking about saying goodbye to my daughter. It's hard. A lot of people, I've been talking about this here, of course, on the podcast and on social media. A lot of other parents who have already gone through this or are going through it along with me right now have been sharing their experiences, their advice, their stories, and it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It really is. Thank you so much for all of your advice and your insights. People replied to my Facebook post if you want to read some of them, but yeah, I said I'm having the hardest time getting anything done this week. We dropped Ava off at college Thursday. It's all I can think about, and so we're going to miss her. She's such an awesome person. Love her so much. And Heidi Stevens, formerly of the Chicago Tribune, friend of mine, responded. She said, I'm genuinely confused how we're supposed to navigate this process of letting go of the people we love more than life itself. Yeah, really well said, Heidi. Thank you very much. And Jose said on my Facebook page, we're packing our son's belongings as I write this. It's truly bittersweet watching your child grow into young adults. There's a solemn pride that sometimes causes the air in your throat to linger when speaking to them. So well said, Jose. He goes on to say, I've been spending as much time as possible with my son this summer, and many times my eyelids were unable to withstand the deluge of emotions that I've been experiencing. Hang in there, buddy. Best of luck with your daughter and all of her future endeavors. Thank you, Jose, and everybody else who responded. Yeah, you know, when heard that from a couple of other people, I'm trying to savor every last moment, every last day, create that, say everything I want to say. My buddy Alex is like, I'm trying to give her all my last minute advice, and I've written a letter to Ava that has some of that in it. But I do have to say, for you younger parents, the best parenting advice I've been given, and now I pay forward and share, the best thing you can do is be with them. So yeah, we're trying to spend as much time as we can with each other, which is why I can't do the hangout tonight, because we're going to see the Barbie movie tonight. And I told you it was going to be a crazy week. I'm sorry to cancel the hangout. I might be able to do it Friday. I really hate to do it, but it's going to be our last night together before the next day when we bring Ava up to college. So no hangout tonight because we're spending that time together as much as we can. But I like to believe that I did that their whole lives. And I will continue to do that with Julia, who's going into 10th grade, has 3 more years here without her sister. That's another heartbreaking circumstance, because proudest thing I am as a parent is that my girls are so close. I don't take credit for that. It just happened. Val probably gets more credit in many ways, including sending them to camp together a few years back. Really made a huge bond that has never been broken, but probably would have also happened as they matured. Anyway, we're lucky that they're close. It's not always the case with siblings, and I'm really happy about that, but it's going to be hard for Jewel. Obviously, it's going to be hard for Val and I, and so I'm happy that I chose to make tough decisions in my life and career, mainly, that would keep me home with my daughter and not on the road as a comedian every weekend. I would have missed so many important things, and that just wasn't worth it to me. I carved out a different kind of career, and here we are working on the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I'll shut up about that issue now, but I always try to be transparent, and it creates ideas and solutions, and we'll talk about it as a community, as we will the news with everything that's happening. So let's get to that. Thank you for all of your kind notes and thoughts and advice. It's so appreciated. standupwithpete@gmail.com as always, or on the Discord platform. You can hang out with us as well. Welcome to all new subscribers. A few new subscribers over the last couple weeks. That's awesome. Thank you very much. Can't do the show without you guys. So Going to need you to stick around to pay for college. I don't go anywhere. If you want to cancel your subscription, let me know first. I'll talk you out of it. I'll do whatever I can. What can I do for you? Speaking of what I can do for listeners, just a quick heads up. Our friend Kevin Richburg, who is a farmer in upstate New York, who has joined us at many of our hangouts, and while at the hangouts is constructing bee boxes for his honeybees. Well, those honeybees are about to produce honey, and you can buy that honey from him and support Kevin, who is awesome. I'll give you more information on that real soon when I have it, but I was talking to Kevin yesterday. That honey is going to be ready, and he needs you to buy it. And I told him the stand-up community is going to come through because, you always do, and support each other in so many different ways. I told him, we'll probably sell that honey out in like 48 hours, maybe less. So don't prove me wrong. Get some of that sweet Kevin Richburg, Slate Hill Forest Edible Farms honeybee juice. Okay, well, let's get to the news, everybody. I'm just going to mention a few stories that are not related to Trump being indicted for the fourth time, and then we'll get to that. And my interview with Segall begins at a little past 26 minutes in the podcast, if you want to jump ahead. But I've got some great analysis from Chris Hayes, Glenn Kirshner, and more on the indictments you want to hear. But, okay, top news stories, just a few that I saw that maybe have gone undercovered. In Nebraska, a judge has upheld a new statewide ban on abortion after 12 weeks and a ban on gender-affirming care for minors as well. CEO of Planned Parenthood North Central States, the region that covers Nebraska's name is Ruth Richardson. She decried the ruling, saying it was a devastating blow to Nebraskans' fundamental rights to make what should be private decisions between them and their doctors. So we'll follow what happens in yet another red state limiting women's health care. Of course, the fires in Hawaii, the death toll has gone up. At least 101 people now have been killed in Maui's fires. But don't worry, Will Cain raised $1 million for people in Hawaii. Our old friend Will Cain of Fox News. And I just saw that and I was like, yeah, of course you did. But Hawaii is part of your life. Like, he spent like a portion of every year of his life there, and it means a lot to him. And so, yeah, people always raise money for the place that means a lot to them, but don't care as much about the places that don't. And I don't know, I kind of think that sucks. Just because you don't have a direct connection to something. I didn't see Will Cain raising money for Haiti. Maybe he did. All right, I'm being a cynical bastard. I'm sorry about that. New Jersey Supreme Court rules in favor of a Catholic school that fired a teacher for having premarital sex. How about that? Now, I don't know the legal underpinnings of this decision that the New Jersey Supreme Court made. If I had known about it, I would have asked Segall to look into it. But the fact that this is against the law, or against the school rules, the St. Teresa school, I think that's more of the problem, that they have a rule against premarital sex in any organization, is what I think. Thought this was an interesting political poll up in New Hampshire. Chris Christie has pulled ahead of Ron DeSantis. Is that just because it's New Hampshire? Are we going to see that in any other GOP primary polls? That was interesting. And finally, this, of course, always goes undercovered. The president and many in his cabinet this week taking a victory lap on the Inflation Reduction Act. The president, for his part, went out to Wisconsin. He was speaking in Wisconsin about the progress thanks to investments like the IRA. And here he is for about 1:40. You want to hear the president in Wisconsin for about 1:40? If you don't, you can fast forward. But I'm playing it for you. Anyway, here he is. Exactly what he should be doing.
We're investing in America. According to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, my plan is leading to a boom. They call it a boom in manufacturing. And manufacturing investment, as you're seeing right here in this factory. Over 13.4 million new jobs, 150,000 new jobs in the state of Wisconsin. Nearly 800,000 new manufacturing jobs nationwide. More than 20,000 manufacturing jobs in Wisconsin, from Green Bay to Verona to Pleasant Prairie. We've added more jobs in 2 years than any president has in American history in a 4-year term. More in 2 than any's done in 4. And unemployment has been below 4% for the longest stretch in over 50 years. 50 years. Wisconsin's unemployment rate is just 2.5%. That's lower than it was every single month the prior administration. We've recovered all the jobs lost during the pandemic. We've added millions more. People are coming off the sidelines, getting back into the workplace. Remember, a while there, they were saying, well, Biden just allowed people not to work and get paid. Guess what? The higher percentage of American workers working today than ever before.
Yeah.
And while unemployment is down, in case you haven't noticed, inflation is down too, and it's going lower.
Oh, we went down to the lower register whisper there. Bidenomics, everybody. There he is in Wisconsin yesterday. All right. Well, those are some of the stories that don't relate to the indictment. And now let's get to that. And the rest of the show pretty much dedicated to that. And so I think Chris Hayes is one of the smartest commentators in all of politics. And it's not a popular thing to give credit to a mainstream media, corporate media type, but I've always loved Chris Hayes, even when he's at The Nation, and he does these opinion pieces on his show, and I thought this one last night was really good. I've tried to say this in different ways and many times over the years myself, that there's two sets of rules for Republicans and Democrats especially, and the Republicans just want to win, and they don't apply the same set of rules, making that point lately when we're seeing the special counsel and prosecution of Hunter Biden. Fine, let's prosecute him. All the laws he broke, taxes, having a gun, let's prosecute him. And that's fine with me. I have no problem with prosecuting the son of the president. And I just want that to be applied consistently. So if you feel the same way about the Donald Trump's son and daughter and son-in-law being prosecuted, then good. You're being consistent. You're not being a partisan. You're not applying a different set of rules. But I think Chris Hayes takes that to a whole new height with his kind of brilliant analysis and historical philosophical quotes about this, including, I think at one point at the end here, he quotes a Peruvian dictator. And it's real good, and I want to share more clips like this. The analysis that I see, there's nothing unethical apparently about this anymore. It helps promote Chris Hayes and his show. He certainly doesn't mind me playing this. Everybody's doing it, and so am I. I take in media. I think it's good. I cut it up. I share it with you sometimes, and I, of course, create my own. But here's MSNBC's Chris Hayes last night. I think this is real good.
When Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg charged Donald Trump in connection with the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels in 2016, they claimed he was just a rogue local prosecutor out to get Trump for something that happened a long time ago. But then when the ex-president was caught with boxes full of classified documents that he stored in his bathroom, well, then they said the Justice Department, this time the national prosecutor, not a local prosecutor, but this was the Justice Department being weaponized by Joe Biden. And what about Joe Biden's garage? And when that same special counsel, Jack Smith, brought the second federal indictment against Trump for trying to steal the 2020 election, they said he was trying to take away the ex-president's First Amendment rights. And now that he's being prosecuted in Georgia under the racketeering statute, not the weaponized Biden Justice Department, now we're back to another rogue prosecutor going after him for political reasons from a liberal jurisdiction. When you put it all together, it's ludicrous. It's obviously plainly reverse engineered around defending Donald Trump over all else. We know that. I mean, the people offering these defenses know that too. We all know it. Today, Senator Lindsey Graham even brought back an old hit. Let the voters choose.
The American people can decide whether they want him to be president or not. This should be decided at the ballot box, not in a bunch of liberal jurisdictions trying to put the man in jail.
The voters did choose. They chose. I was there. I covered it. You were there too, Lindsay, in 2020. And then Donald Trump unleashed a mob to bash in the brains of the Capitol Police as the braying hooligans erected a gallows and called for Mike Pence to be hanged, which he wasn't, luckily. As ridiculous as this all seems, there's an important principle here. There is one. And this is actually where we sort of hit the foundation of it all. It's best embodied in an often quoted line. You might see it online a lot. It actually comes from a comment on a political science blog. It goes like this, quote, conservatism consists of exactly one proposition. There must be in-groups whom the law protects but does not bind, alongside out-groups whom the law binds but does not protect. It goes hand in hand with another saying, another way of saying, which is often attributed to a Latin American dictator, which goes like this, for my friends, everything, for my enemies, the law. Right? The core idea here, which animates all the defenses from Donald Trump and his, frankly, pathetic lackeys, is that there is no such thing as democratic equality in the law. that's a fiction or ludicrously naive or not even desirable. No. That's not what is the reality. It's not what we should want. What we should want and what there is are people who should be in power and they can do whatever they want to the other people who should be subject to that power. And it just depends on which side of the line you are. See, Fani Willis and Alvin Bragg, who the president calls racist, you can figure out why. Jack Smith, they're the wrong kind of people. They don't get the power to prosecute people like Trump. The law should not be in their hands. The law should not protect them. They should not be able to wield the law. Donald Trump, well, he represents the right kind of people who the law should never touch. The law should be in his hands, and he can do with it whatever he wants. There is no value-neutral sense of equal justice. None of it. It's cynicism all the way down. It's the core contention of authoritarianism, of anti-democratic right-wing reaction through literally the centuries. I mean, going back. And it's the core contention of Donald Trump himself, who hates democracy and has always been kind of clear about that. It's the core contention that animated the sack of the Capitol. It's the core contention that animates all of our politics as this moment. Is there really such a thing as democratic reality? As democratic equality? Are we all really equal under the eyes of the law? Is that how it is, and is that how it should be? Or is there a group of people who get to run the country with an iron fist, even if they are the minority, because the power belongs to them in some deeper sense? And that latter proposition is what the Republican Party stands for right now.
Oh, man, I thought that was so good. That's why I played most of that. Also, on Chris Hayes' show, he had a woman named Tanya Miller, who's a representative in the Georgia State House, but she's a former assistant district attorney and worked with Fani Willis. And he asked her specifically about how RICO has been used by this specific prosecutor. You may have heard about all those teachers a few years back that you prosecuted. Talk about that with Segall. And in this district, in this court, in Fulton County, I should say. Tanya Miller on MSNBC last night explaining that. Real good stuff.
Well, I will tell you that the Georgia RICO statute is, as everyone has now picked up, thanks to Madam DA Fani Willis, a very broad and powerful statute. It is like a freight train for the prosecution running through the courtroom. It is one of the most difficult cases to defend, and here's why. You don't have to be an enterprise in the traditional sense of the word. You don't have to be a business. You don't have to be a corporation. It doesn't have to be all that organized. In Georgia, the enterprise can be formed just like that. This indictment spans a few months, essentially. So that is what makes it so powerful. In addition to the enterprise being so loose, there isn't the same need to show a continuity between the crimes. All you have to show is that these crimes were all done in furtherance of a common purpose to advance the purpose of the enterprise. In this case, the purpose of the enterprise, which is this loosely formed group of Trump supporters, was to keep Donald Trump in power, was to steal the Georgia election. That's enough to get you indicted in Georgia under our RICO statute. All you have to show is that these individuals committed a series of crimes. They don't have to be a particular type of crime. In this case, the crimes are, trying to interfere with an election, soliciting a public official to not do their public duty, forgery and fraud. All of these sort of small crimes, when you string them together and they're done in furtherance of a common purpose for an enterprise, can be a RICO with very significant prison time in Georgia.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to get her on this program right here. And now, finally, someone who joins me a lot, but I didn't even ask him this week because I think he's doing so much of his own content and he gets paid. He's got to pick those opportunities first at MSNBC. He's a regular contributor, of course, joins me regularly. It's the great Glenn Kirshner, Justice Matters on YouTube. He read just a part of the indictment, so I'm going to let him do that, and then gave his analysis. And so I want to play a little of that, and then we'll get to my conversation with Eric Segall. But here's a little bit of Glenn Kirshner reading part of the indictment and analysis.
Here is how the indictment opens. Introduction. Defendant Donald John Trump lost the United States presidential election held on November 3rd, 2020. One of the states he lost was Georgia. Trump and the other defendants charged in this indictment refused to accept that Trump lost, and they knowingly and willfully joined a conspiracy to unlawfully change the outcome of the election in favor of Trump. The conspiracy contained a common plan and purpose to commit 2 or more acts of racketeering activity in Fulton County, Georgia, elsewhere in the state of Georgia, and in other states. The indictment then goes on to say the defendants are being charged for offenses in violation of the Georgia RICO Act. That stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations. The indictment then goes on to list the acts of racketeering activity and overt acts in furtherance of the conspiracy, and it goes on to list 161 racketeering or rack acts and overt acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. Let me just state the obvious. That's a whole lot of racketeering activity.
All right, so now let's get a little more. Now, the analysis, I'll let a couple more minutes of Glenn Kirshner's great points that he makes on his YouTube channel, Justice Matters. Go ahead, Glenn.
19 defendants indicted, 41 charges, 41 criminal counts, and the lead charge is a RICO conspiracy, racketeer influenced and corrupt organizations. The punishment in the event of conviction of a RICO conspiracy charge is 5 years to 20 years, and the 5 is a mandatory minimum. What does that mean? Well, if Donald Trump is convicted of the RICO charge, when Donald Trump is convicted of the RICO charge, he will have to be sentenced to 5 years in prison for openers. That's the mandatory minimum. Next, who are some of Donald Trump's co-defendants, his co-conspirators, his criminal associates? Well, there are a lot of the usual suspects. In fact, there are lots of his lawyers, his corrupt lawyers, his lawyers with whom he conspired to try to overthrow a presidential election. Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, Jeffrey Clark, corrupt DOJ official, John Eastman, Kenneth Chesbrough, Jenna Ellis, and others. In fact, there are 19 defendants in all. And at her post-indictment press conference, District Attorney Fani Willis said she intends to try all 19 defendants together. Here's the thing. She won't have to. Why do I say that? Well, seeing your name as a marquee defendant in a big old RICO conspiracy indictment has a way of getting your attention, focusing one's minds, and I suspect there's going to be something of a race to the prosecutor's office, at least for some of those 19 charged defendants, maybe not guys like Rudy Giuliani, but for some of those defendants, they're going to want to cut their losses. They're going to want to strike a deal. They're going to want to become cooperating witnesses. They're going to want to get themselves out of that RICO indictment as a charged defendant. And frankly, it looks like there are already lots of cooperating witnesses in this case. Why do I say that? Well, as you read through this nearly 100-page indictment, there are, I believe, 30 unindicted co-conspirators. Unindicted, unnamed, we don't know who they are, but here's the thing. When you see the term unindicted co-conspirator in an indictment, you know what that generally signals? That person is cooperating, because if he or she wasn't cooperating, they would be an indicted defendant, like the 19 defendants who are indicted. So I suspect lots of people flipped before the indictment was handed down. So they didn't want their name as a marquee indictment on the wrong side of the V, state of Georgia, V, the named defendants. They cut their losses early on. They tried to take what they did so wrong when they were helping Trump and company try to overturn the election's results, and they tried to make it right. Better late than never. Better you cooperate and try to make right what you did so wrong previously. So I suspect there are lots of cooperating witnesses, and I have a feeling there are going to be several more. So I don't think Fani Willis will have to take 19 people to trial.
I'm probably going to talk to Glenn Kirshner next week. Sorry to cut you off there, Glenn, but write your questions, send your questions. I'm going to see him. He's having a gathering for his subscribers at third annual, and I'm invited to be there and speak there along with a couple of other people like Alison Gill and Maz Jobrani, and I forget who else is going to be. I think Dino Badala, is going to be down there as well. And so I'm going to be in D.C. the 25th and 27th primarily for that. But if you want to hang out, I'm already connected with a few listeners and subscribers of this year's show in our community. So let me know. Also, I should mention the 7th of September, I'll be in Iowa City. Iowa City, come on out. There's a link to buy tickets in the show notes if I remember to put it in there. If not, you can ping me and I'll send it right to you. But I'll get it up on all my social media. Actually, it's pinned on my Twitter account or X account, whatever the hell that's called. All right, let's get to the great Eric Segall right now. Always great catching up with him. He's got a great piece on Dwarf on Law about this whole concern or idea, I should say, that a couple of Federalist conservative legal scholars wrote this piece that Trump cannot run again. He's not legally allowed to run again because of the treason and the 14th Amendment. He has a great piece about that. I talked with him about it at the end of our conversation. But of course, it's all about the fallout of the indictments in Georgia, which he's in high demand to be on a whole bunch of shows. Georgia State constitutional law scholar, the host of Supreme Myths podcast, the author of Originalism as Faith, and of course, Supreme Myths. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the Legal Eagle, the latest from Eric Segall.
Well, there you are. I'm glad you could fit me in, what with all of your appearances and invitations, all the cable networks, The Economist, The Guardian. Everybody wants a piece of Segall, and I'm mad because I'm your champion. They should be asking your comments and interviewing you on a broad range of issues. But because this is Georgia and you're Georgia State University professor, I feel like that's why they might be calling you. That's bullshit.
Yeah, no, I feel very fairly treated by the media nationally and internationally in this country because they don't often go to professors at schools like Georgia State and or people from Emory and Vanderbilt, not Harvard and Yale, which is just true. It's where the world is. And like The Economist, they solicited an op-ed from me last year. I was so flattered.
Look at you. Yeah.
And then they drew a picture of me, by the way.
Oh, do we have that? I've seen that.
Which is the most flattering. I wish I looked this way. If I looked like this, that would be great.
Yeah, you do. You look like Branch Rickey. Anyway, I don't know where that
somebody said a young Robert De Niro. I don't know what to think about that. But anyway, go ahead.
Or that, yeah. But you've always looked like an older Robert De Niro. So you're in a lot of demand. That's great. I
have a funny story for you before we begin. Sorry, I think your audience might appreciate this. I would only tell this on your show. There's no other place in the galaxy I would tell this story. My wife, Lynn, left last night for business in Charlotte, North Carolina, which means I had to get myself ready for my CNN appearance today.
On your own without the help of your wife, which she normally would help you? Is that what you're insinuating?
Yes. And sadly and tragically, we have this problem right here, which is not terrible right now. But on CNN, if you look at it,
your hair is long in the back, and
she's going to kill me when she sees this.
You have a hair issue.
My kid said, and I quote, "Wow, Dad, it's so cool you're on TV and you're really good, but what's going on with your hair?"
Yeah. Well, is that why you're telling me? Because I don't have any hair to worry about when I'm on TV? Is that what you're saying?
Actually, the person I was on with on CNN, and I apologize to him, I don't remember his name, he was totally bald. So Sarah and Kai said, "Well, Dad, at least you have hair to mess up."
Oh, that's nice. I think it's pathetic that you need your wife to help you, but I think it's sweet as well. So
sorry. Yeah. Light moment, because what we're about to do is very serious. That's
all right. Moment. So we've got the indictments. It is a big deal. It's not just Trump. It's a whole bunch of names that we recognize and some that we don't. Yes. We can go through the charges. You're not a criminal law expert. You're a con law expert. So given that, what do you think the most important issue in terms of constitutional law here? Because there's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. There are two huge issues. I want your audience to know right away. There's no chance this case is going to trial in 6 months. That's what she said
in 6 months. She wants it to go to trial. You're saying there's no chance.
Okay, let me rephrase that. That's not a good answer. Just about no chance. Here's why. The very first thing Donald Trump is going to do is what he did in New York. We don't have to guess. His lawyers have already said it. He's going to file a motion to take this case from Fulton County State Court to the federal district court 2 blocks away. And you might say, what's the big deal? It's 2 blocks away. Pete, this is a huge deal. There is a federal statute, and it's a good federal statute. We want this federal statute that says if you're a federal officer sued for criminal acts in state court because of, and this is the key, your official duties, and you have a colorable federal defense, then you can remove the case to federal court. Let me explain it this way.
Yikes.
Let me explain it this way. 1961, Georgia. Okay? Brown is 1954. As you and I have talked about 100 times, Georgia was 99% segregated in 1961, 7 years later. Same thing with Alabama and Mississippi. Federal officials, National Guard, other people from the federal government come to the South to help desegregate the schools. And they are intimidated, harassed, and arrested under state law on bogus charges. From that point, they say, wait a minute, I'm a federal officer. I was carrying out federal law. You can't, the Supremacy Clause says federal law is supreme in the Constitution. You can't arrest me for doing my job. I want that issue resolved in federal court. That's why we had the statute, right? It's like the statute goes back to the 19th century, but it's really important. State officials have been known to harass federal officials doing their job, especially when it came to desegregation. So what Trump is going to argue, now don't get me wrong, I accept none of this factually, but Trump is going to argue, as president of the United States, I had the right to make sure the federal election was fair, and that's all I was doing. Now, he made this motion in New York in the Stormy Daniels case, and the judge correctly said, no, it stays in state court because paying hush money to a stripper is not official conduct by the president of the United States, and no reasonable person could think so.
Right.
This case is much harder. Now, let me give you the hypo I just gave to my con law nerdy list. Imagine a very, very liberal president who is running for re-election, and a red state does all kinds of terrible and illegal things to get him not the electoral college votes in that state. The president comes in saying, I'm enforcing federal law, that's all I'm doing here, and tries to get the red state to follow the law. He's then prosecuted in that red state for criminal offenses. Pete, do you want that liberal president being tried in Alabama state court or federal court?
So he wants the case moved out of state court into federal court so that if he becomes president, he can pardon himself.
No, nothing to do with that. A Fulton County grand jury is going to be overwhelmingly African-American. It's just overwhelming. A jury in federal court in Atlanta has a much broader scope and is much more racially diverse.
So he wants the case moved so he has a better chance of winning. With a jury.
Another reason. So the first issue is, can he remove to federal court? That's going to take a long time to figure out, and it will likely go to the Supreme Court of the United States. So that's why 6 months is not a possibility. It's one of the.
Oh, okay. What's the other? The
other one's even worse. The other one's even more serious.
Yeah.
There's something called Supremacy Clause immunity, and what that is you can't, if a federal official is doing their job in a reasonable way, states cannot put that person in jail for that act. They just can't. If federal law is allowing a federal official to do federal things, state courts can't put. So in the late 1890s, some bodyguard for the president shot somebody, and some Secret Service person shot somebody, and was sued in state court for murder. He killed him. His defense was, I was doing my job under federal law, protecting the president. He was indicted for murder, got to federal court, and they dismissed the charges.
Wow.
So now, was Trump, and because of that problem, Larry Tribe, just 2 hours ago, published a piece in The Atlantic saying the president has no official responsibility towards a presidential election that he is a candidate in. And maybe Lawrence Tribe is right. Mike Dorff thinks that too, I think. Maybe Mike is right. That's fine. That might be right. But the point is, it might be wrong. And we are in completely uncharted waters here. We are in a place no one's ever been before.
One
more thing.
Since he got elected.
My nerdy con law people keep saying to me, come on, Trump was, he's obviously stealing the election. And they're right, factually. You know what happened last week? A lower federal court judge ordered lawyers to get, quote, religious liberty training at the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a hate organization by the Southern. So anything could happen.
Anything could happen, but it most likely will not, according to your con law friend nerds, who I'm sure disagree with you on this. You're saying it's possible, and there's precedent for things like that happening, but this is, as you also said, different. We've never been here with a defendant like this one.
What I'm saying is what Oliver Wendell Holmes, not a bad person to cite, said a long time ago. Hard cases make bad law. All of America today, that's an overstatement. Most of us are hoping Trump gets tried, convicted, sent to prison in Georgia. Minimum sentence, by the way, mandatory, 5 years. Mandatory minimum sentence, 5 years on the RICO charge. Mandatory. Imagine how scary he is. 5 years. Anyway, and that's great. And we should be wanting that. You know what I'm thinking about as a constitutional law professor? The next president.
Well, okay, that's all super interesting and scary as usual.
Yes.
But let's be clear, there are 18 other defendants here that your argument doesn't apply to.
No, it applies to the Attorney General, the guy at Clark, the Department of Justice.
Meadows, anybody who was employed at the federal government, Meadows.
Yes.
But not Giuliani.
Well, actually, Pete, it gets more complicated than that. If you're a contractor and you get into a contract with the government to build a federal building, and they give you the specs and they give you the measurements.
Right.
It is possible because you are being told
what was Giuliani's official role?
I don't think Giuliani can. Well, if he was, wasn't he at one point a counselor to the president or something?
At one point, he was America's mayor. So a lot of things have happened, but he's going down. Is the most important to me is that Giuliani goes down
more than Trump.
Yes, because Trump has 3 other chances to go down, and this is the only one that we've seen on Giuliani. He has to go down. He has to be.
Well, he's going to be hit with a huge verdict in that defamation case. He's already. He said he acted with malice, and he already
the defamation case brought by the 2 volunteers.
Yes.
The black women, the Freemans.
He's already lost that case. He stipulated everything away.
Right. So will that include prison time?
No, that's just a civil case.
That's a civil case, right?
It's going to cost him a lot of money.
So there's a whole bunch of other things that we've got to get to. I've got a couple obvious questions that a lot of people are asking, and I want to get your perspective on.
Sure.
But you can feel free, as you often do, to lead this interview. But are you ready?
Was that a?
Well, no, it wasn't. I'm not being a dick. I'm saying, like, we always have talks often before we hit record. Let's talk about this and this. And in this case, we've done that, but there's a few other things that I think are maybe don't take a lot of time, and I want to make sure that we get to them.
Before you ask me, I have to make one observation.
Sure.
I was already 3 times today on Twitter. People said, "Did you coordinate your tie with the other guy on CNN?"
Yeah.
People are going to ask us if we coordinated our shirts.
We are wearing. I noticed that we are wearing a light blue, powder baby, sky blue, whatever you want to call it, collared shirt. I did notice that. I also noticed, while I'm noticing it, how much better mine fits because of my torso.
Well, you're much more of a man than I am.
My upper body. Much more of a man.
That picture behind me, I want to say this. My dad drew that.
You keep talking about things that the vast majority of people will never see because this is an audio podcast, but it is a wonderful painting that your dad.
Sorry, that's such a terrible mistake on my part. Edit that out.
I won't. Here we go. Can the governor of Georgia pardon Donald Trump and these other defendants?
The governor of Georgia can't pardon anybody. Georgia has a Bureau of Pardon and Paroles. They have the exclusive authority to do it. And in Georgia, you have to serve your sentence first.
Right. And that should be everywhere, right? A panel that would go through the pardons.
I would prefer that.
Yeah. I might slow things down, but.
No, I would prefer that too. And by the way, that's effectively how the federal government works. They have a Department of Justice. Well, before Trump changed all this. But for the first 200 years of our history, there was a special committee there to do that.
Okay. So 19 people are brought up on RICO charges. I know you're not a criminal law expert. I know
about this.
Yeah. So why RICO? I think one of the things that's kind of, I just learned this, maybe I was reading your Twitter feed, is interesting is Fani Willis has brought a similar charge, very different, but against a whole bunch of teachers that was nationwide news. A lot of these teachers were people of color, were women. She brought that regardless of ethnicity, gender, politics, whatever, because these teachers were corrupt. They had gamed the system. It was similar there. And what I mean, and it's the same prosecutor in this case, Fani Willis. So there is some, I don't want to call it precedent because this is so different, but
No. Pete, you're making a great point. It is precedent, actually. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
To bring a whole bunch of people up on charges on a similar charge, in this case, RICO. Yeah.
So let's go back to
a lot of people just think RICO is a mafia thing, but the idea is there's a reason, there's a history for this, and there's a reason for this, and I think it matters a lot. RICO.
Well, before we get to what RICO is, which I will talk about just briefly in a second, I can talk about that intelligently. More importantly, I have a friend in Atlanta named John Floyd, and he works for a small elite law firm here. He may be the nation's leading expert on RICO. Seriously. He's not first, he's first, second.
You talked to him yet?
Yes. But what I'm going to report here is the Atlanta Constitution, the newspaper in Atlanta, reported that John has been working with the DA. Now, let me tell you.
Meaning John's advising Fani Willis.
That's what the Atlanta Constitution reported.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying the Atlanta Constitution reported.
Well, it's if in a newspaper report, it's pretty.
I'm going to confirm it.
They have sources, and you are now mine.
I know that it's true.
Right. You're his friend. Okay. Now, why are we hemming and hawing over this?
Yes. So let me tell you something. RICO is a potent tool for prosecutors. You don't want John Floyd on the other side of that. You really don't. So now, what is RICO? Basically, it allows. There's a federal RICO and various state RICO, but they all have there's differences. But one commonality is this is how you bring in a lot of people in one case, and you get to bring in all kinds of evidence of conspiracy that might be harder to bring in if it wasn't for RICO. And in Georgia, all that is required is basically 2 predicate criminal acts, just two, and an agreement among 3 or more people to carry out the illegal plan. Well, to the extent that Trump and Giuliani and Meadows and John Eastman, the law professor who I actually know and is impossibly horrible, and all those people, they colluded together, allegedly, to make false statements, forge documents, all these different crimes, all of which are felonies. RICO is a minimum 5-year sentence if you're convicted. And if Trump does not get the case removed, I can't imagine he would roll the dice and go to trial. He doesn't have the balls to do that. Minimum 5 years in prison. Anyway, Fannie, that teacher case you were talking about, the Atlanta Journal also reported, was the largest scandal of cheating teachers in U.S. history. It was an incredibly complicated case. It was national headlines, and she handled it amazingly well. I don't know this for a fact. My guess would be John helped her with that. I don't know that, but I'm guessing. That's a formidable team, Pete.
And he's on her side, but do we know if he's advised? Like, the question is, if he's such an expert on it, is he saying, yes, you will win on these charges? Otherwise, she wouldn't have brought these charges if a guy like him.
I don't know I have no firsthand knowledge of any of that. Right. I will speculate that if John had said to her, you don't have it, she wouldn't have brought it.
The issue of, I hate the word conspiracy because the vast majority of us think of conspiracy theories as opposed to how it's used legally. And in this case, I would just wish we could replace it with like something like cooperators or organizers.
We can. Engaging in a criminal enterprise. That's the RICO language. They were engaged in a criminal enterprise. And they were, by the way. We think, look, Pete, it's really important to say this. Donald Trump, like every other person living in this country, has the right to due process of law and has the right to a fair and impartial process. And he's innocent until proven guilty in court. That's what he is, for legal purposes. Having said all that, boy, this feels like a criminal enterprise to steal a national election.
RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corruptions Organization. Is that right?
Yes.
And what is racketeering in this case? In this case, specific case, like how does that charge apply to these defendants?
it requires 2. I think in Georgia 3. Let's not get hung up on that. In federal law it's 2, but I think in Georgia 3. Doesn't matter. Let's call it 3. 3 or more acts of criminality is all that's talking about. By the way, I want to go back because you said something earlier you were right about. This law was originally designed to get at the mafia. I mean, that's
the mafia, right? And we hear it all the time in mafia movies and books and true stories and charges.
Funny. You do in New York. Here in Atlanta, we only hear it for politicians.
Oh, well, well, I mean, it's in movies. I mean, and in organized crime. Anyway, I brought up on RICO charges,
but that was good.
Yeah, that's my latest audition.
But it is worded much broader than just for the organized crime, and it's been used hundreds of times for non-organized crime activities.
And the point here, and it's not lost, this is more of a political, well, I guess it's a legal point too, is in the indictment, apparently, I didn't read it. Why would I? I've got you and others. It's they reference other states, including Pennsylvania and Arizona. In Georgia, they reference those other states. My understanding is because this conspiracy, all these different things they were doing, and there were several different things they were doing to try to overturn the election, they needed a lot of different people buying in. Obviously, the secretaries of state of Georgia and elsewhere, they were doing what they were doing in Georgia in those other states, which is why did she reference those other states in this case? Am I onto this?
I think you're absolutely onto it. And I am not going to speculate as to why she did it, because that's not the kind of thing I do. But it was really smart, because there's a lot in this indictment about Pennsylvania. I mean, a lot. And without the RICO charge, she wouldn't be able to bring that in, by the way. Georgia has no jurisdiction over Pennsylvania stuff. But as part of a criminal conspiracy enterprise, as we were talking earlier, she can. But I did read the indictment. It was very late at night, but I did read it. Boy, it tells a story, Pete, and it tells a powerful story. And the thing that's so powerful about it, and I apologize if anyone's listening to this who's not of our political persuasion, Pete, the story is just true. Like, we know what Trump and Meadows and Giuliani were doing in Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia. There's a couple others. They were trying to get the legislature or somebody to do weird and illegal things to, steal the election. Bringing in what he did in Pennsylvania, he did in Georgia is a powerful statement, right? It's more proof of the same thing. What my only regret is about this whole indictment? It's a great indictment. It's well read. It's well written. It's a story. It would play well to a jury. Here's my one regret. Want to hear it?
Yeah.
Ginny Thomas is not indicted.
You think she should have been named in?
No, I don't. I do not.
Okay. But I hear you. Yeah, I mean, we could say that about Lindsey Graham, and we could say...
we can't. We can't, because Lindsey Graham probably has immunity. There's something called the speech and debate clause, and members of Congress are immune for anything they say or do on the floor of the House and Senate, and pretty much, that's a more complicated issue.
Well, Steve Bannon, maybe. But anyway, the point is, I mean, the larger point of why I think what you're saying true also is what I think you shared, Simon Rosenberg tweet. We were reminded tonight that the conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election was a Republican Party-wide conspiracy involving hundreds of Republican officials across the U.S., including the chair of the RNC. Serious stuff. This is a political point, but still the point is, and a lot of people are making this point, there are members of Congress that are still arguing about the big lie. And there are so many people that were involved with this, basically this conspiracy, some criminally and some not, but went along with it, at least rhetorically, supporting it. Luckily, Mike Pence didn't. But although, he doesn't get any courage, he couldn't have. There's nothing he could have done that day. So anyway, getting back to...
I don't agree with that.
You think that he could have somehow, as vice president, had the power to not certify the election or certify the false electors somehow?
I've studied this issue. I am persuaded there is nothing legal he could do. That doesn't mean he couldn't do anything.
What could he have done?
We're in the era of Trump here. I mean, if Pence had gone to the podium and said, well, you know what? I have competing electors. I have electors from Pennsylvania. Right. I have electors from Georgia. He could have physically mouthed those words. And if he does that, I don't know what happens next.
Right. Okay. Well, getting back to...
I'm not giving Pence credit. I wasn't saying that to give Pence credit. I'm just saying, if it had been Ted Cruz, what would Ted Cruz have done, Pete, if he had been vice president?
Anything to win. Anything to win.
That's my point.
Yeah. Okay, so Rick Hasson had a really interesting piece at Slate why the Fulton County indictment is different from Jack Smith's case. Hint, it's all about race. And I read that and kind of wanted to get your take on that issue, or any other issue that separates the Fulton County case, this fourth indictment of the former disgraced president, the Hollow Barrel, that is the Orange Man, from the other three indictments.
So a disclaimer, Rick wrote me this morning. We're friends. He sent me his piece. I tweeted it out. I read it, and I mentioned I didn't have time to mention his name. I wish I could have, but I mentioned this on CNN this morning. Race is a huge part of this in so many different ways. First, we know that Trump's a bigot, a bad bigot, and he doesn't like women yelling at him, and he's not going to handle.
Bigot is a little soft.
Okay, okay, whatever you want.
Like, I'm a bigot.
He will react differently to a white male prosecutor than a black female prosecutor.
Sure.
Can we agree on,
okay, yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes, but even if you couldn't prove that to some people, what else is there about race outside of just the judge? Judge Chutkan, you could argue, or the Attorney General in New York, you could argue, as well as Bonnie Willis. Black women,
we already talked about the jury pool. It's a much more diverse jury pool in federal court and state court. So race comes into play.
Georgia.
In Georgia, yeah. Race comes into play there. Rick Hasen was only saying that the Georgia case is different on the basis of race. He wasn't saying the other. That's what he's saying. And I'm saying I agree with him. 1, because of Fannie Willis. 2, because of the jury pool. 3, Pete, it's a really odd thing America hasn't solved yet. And this gets to a much bigger problem you and I have discussed, but it's raised right here. Atlanta, Georgia is an unbelievably blue place with an African-American government. You know, I mean, I live in a much more liberal place than you do by a lot. And you're in New York and I'm in Georgia. Think about that. That's weird. My city is 10 times more liberal than your town. But 30 miles from here, you know, it's different.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. Yes. And that aspect of this, you know, think of the visual of this.
But just to be clear, so far you've mentioned why this matters about race is the judge, or rather in this case, the prosecutor, and the jury, the potential jury pool.
And the optics of a white president being tried in a criminal trial in a largely African-American city by an African-American prosecutor and possibly an African-American judge.
Oh, really?
The optics, it could be. We don't know the judges yet, I don't think. The guy last night, I don't think is the real judge. He's just the indictment.
Right.
Yeah. There are a number of African-American judges here. I don't know what the politically correct term is. My kids yell at me all the time. I don't know if it's black or African-American or what it is. But
I would say black folks.
Black folks, okay. So that's kind of a big deal. And then, you know, Atlanta this is going to sound self-centered, but Atlanta, Pete, is one of the centers of the civil rights movement. It just was. And Andrew Young, John Lewis, these are all major players.
That's a great point.
You know, and Atlanta's had black mayors since 1976.
The history of the civil rights movement is in the bloodline, the veins of the entire community. What I was thinking, by the way, is, speaking of kind of race generalizations, I don't know how this is going to sit with black folks, but I'll say it. The DC jury and the Atlanta jury, like, if I were to say, like, the most educated, affluent, successful black folks cities, I'd say Atlanta and DC. I mean, so many successful, educated folks moved to one of those two cities. Black folks moved to those cities to work and to live and to raise families and stuff. And it's just like those two cases, if they have, you know, the histories in both these cities, in both these jurisdictions, I think matter a tremendous amount to those actual individuals in the jury, not to mention the judge and prosecutor.
I can't say it better than that. I will add to what you just said because I can't improve on it. A good friend of mine wrote a book called Where Peachtree Meets Sweet Auburn. It's an amazing book. It's too long, but it's an amazing book. It's all about race in Atlanta. And one of the questions he asks is, why in the 60s did every major city in America burn except Atlanta? LA, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Boston, Chicago, they all had riots. They all burned. Atlanta never had a big riot ever. And his thesis, and he's the expert on this, was the Atlanta black middle class and the Atlanta white business community have been merged in this city in a way unlike any other city in America. Not Detroit, not Washington, D.C. There's no business there, not anything. And I think he's right. So you're right about this. And that's part of all of this. But it's not just that. I can't explain this very well. I'm just not in this, because all of that, Rick said all those things. What I'm going to add to it is, and this is not Rick, this is Eric, is, Pete, there's something karmic or something. I have to be honest, and now I'm speaking as a citizen. This is not Eric, the law professor. This is Eric, the citizen. There would be such a nice circle of life type thing for the epicenter of the civil rights movement to be the place where Trump meets.
I mean, like, I've been feeling the same way. I'm not sure how important of a point it is for either of us to make, but or if it's just kind of a Schadenfreude, or if there is symbolism. I mean, I will let black folks speak to it, but the idea that black folks have been saving the country in terms of democracy, in terms of these elections, including in Georgia, obviously twice, and getting Biden nominated as South Carolina. You can give him credit for that as well.
Senator Warnock is African-American senator from the South. Yeah,
but I mean, like, black women being in charge as a judge or prosecutor, we can say a lot about that. We'll let other people decide. But the other race issue here in this case, of course, is the thing that so many people are pointing to and caring a lot about, because we were so heartbroken and devastated and enraged when we watched January 6th committee tell perfectly the story of Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss. And they became central figures, as Hasten writes in his Slate piece, in Trump and his allies' false claims about the Georgia election being stolen from him. The election was stolen from them by these two black women who were volunteers, who subsequently had their lives and reputations destroyed, had to change names, identities. I think one of them had to move. And so that, I believe, is another third component of race in this case specifically.
And those are the two women who Giuliani has already admitted that he defamed.
Right. That he defamed them.
With malice. He lied with malice. Yes. Okay. That's a great, Pete. That's just, I can't improve upon your point.
Well, just several points to why this is different, as hint, it's race. What else do we need to know about this major landmark indictment that dropped last night in terms of analysis, outcome, how it's different?
So because of what you said at the beginning of the show, of the podcast, whatever this is we're doing, I want to be clear. I saved this for you. I've had 15 opportunities to say this, but I saved it.
Here we go, folks, an exclusive.
No, it's not. It's nothing profound, but I just saved it for you. Pete, for most of our lives, we didn't live through history. I mean, there were events, but Bush versus Gore is a big deal. But American history has a lot of stuff. We have civil wars, and we have depressions, and we have stock market crashes, and we have all kinds of things. This time we're living in right now, which was inevitable once Trump became president. Of the president of the United States having to defend 4 criminal cases in 4 different jurisdictions is a moment it's kind of like 9/11. It's kind of like COVID. 100 years from now, people are going to be speculating, talking, discussing, writing. This is in my lifetime. I could think of Bush versus Gore, maybe. I'm not even sure. That's as big as this. If this person goes to jail, it'll be the first time in American history a former president has gone to jail. I mean, this is whereas in other countries it happens routinely.
Well, I think that's the point. That I think some people are getting wrong, in my opinion. That a lot of commentators, including people I like and respect, are saying this is a sad day that an American president has been accused of these crimes.
I didn't say that. I said it's a historic.
I know. I think it's an amazing day because I think that this country's biggest problem historically and why we're so broken primarily is because there's a lack of accountability for horrible things that have been done. So when there is accountability for white collar crime, for terrible things that have been done, that's a good thing. That's good when there's accountability. People are going to do bad things. The positive outcome is justice, some kind of justice, some kind of accountability, whether in this case be civil or criminal. There has to be accountability for the Sackler family who poisoned millions of people. There has to be accountability for the financial industry. There should be accountability for the architects of the Iraq War. There should be accountability for slavery. And so I just feel like this is a great, great time that we're living through in terms of if there is, in fact, accountability. And if, especially with this guy commits crimes his entire life and finally actually has to pay the piper in a way that's not just paying off lawyers to get him.
I hope he does. I hope he does pay the piper. I can't say it any better than that, Pete. I agree 100%. But I do think I'd only add one thing to that wonderful monologue, which was it was emotional for me. I think you're right. You know, I think about government every day. It's my life. Yeah. You know, what you just said was powerful, and it made me really
accountability.
I got shivers. I just want to add to it. We can't ignore the implications of the procedures we use here for the future. And we need to be very careful. And I'm the only liberal who's going to say this, but I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
We have to be very careful that if this were Obama being persecuted by Oklahoma, whatever procedures we do for Trump, we would do for Obama, we would do for Trump. Sure. Well, you say that, Pete, but
I'm not worried about it because, and I might be missing your point, but the reason I'm not worried about it is because it's a false equivalency. The problem that people have around Trump, all of us have sometimes, is that he commits his crimes so openly that we don't even realize that they're crimes. The point being, there's not going to be Joe Biden and the next Democratic president isn't going to do any of these things. They're not going to do any of these.
No, Ron DeSantis could.
Yes, your point is we should hold everybody accountable, liberals and conservatives. And I'm saying we do. And the evidence of that is literally right now when Merrick Garland is bringing charges against Hunter Biden. He's not getting away with anything. He's got a new special counsel investigating him. He's the son of the president. And the guy that the president appointed is bringing him charges. Would Bill Barr have ever brought charges against Jared or Ivanka? That's the difference. That's the difference between Democratic administrations and attorney general, whether you like it or not.
Okay, so I agree with all that.
Rule of law.
Pete, I agree. I think Democrats, as a generalization, as a political party, are infinitely superior.
No, but in terms of the rule of law and how it's applied.
In terms of morality. In terms of just morality. But I think I have to push back a little. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And I've already pushed back with Mike Dorf today, so I'm tired. But
it's easier to push back against me than Dorf, I'm sure.
No, you're pretty tough. I don't want to push back hard. Politicians in the Democrat Party do horrific things all the time. And they lie.
I mean, I could name lots of them. Rod Blagojevich comes to mind right away,
right.
selling Obama's seat.
Among many others.
Sure, not saying they don't commit crimes. I'm saying that they aren't.
You missed my point. No, let me interrupt you. You missed my point. What we have in this situation has never happened before. No, it's important, Pete. We have to develop a set of procedures for what are we going to do with former presidents who you and I think committed crimes, and I think, a jury should find committed crimes. What do we do with that? All I'm saying is we have to have two perspectives. One is, I hope Trump goes to jail. That's one perspective. But another perspective is there are immunity issues, jurisdictional issues, legal issues, presidential prerogative issues, all this stuff. In the back of our heads, we need to keep in mind that whatever the Democrats do today, the Republicans will do tomorrow, and worse, like you were saying.
There's no comparison, even to Nixon. What's the worst thing that a Democratic president has done in our lifetime?
I think sleeping with an intern is pretty bad.
Fine. Let that be the worst thing.
Andrew Jackson is pretty bad.
But I mean, I don't think George Bush was ever accused of any kind of sexual improprieties. But
wait, which one? Which George Bush?
Either. Well, George H.W. Bush was.
I think the first one had.
Yeah, but George W. Bush.
Hold on, reckless speculation.
Yeah,
I think the first one had an affair.
Fine, but I'm saying it doesn't matter because of the war in Iraq and everything else that he did. The point being that Democratic presidents aren't going to tell people to break into the RNC. Literally the way Nixon
you're
did.
Just wrong. I'm sorry, you're just wrong. You want to talk about Lyndon Johnson for a second?
Go ahead, Lyndon Johnson.
You want to talk about Jack Kennedy for a second?
If you want to talk about what Lyndon Johnson or Jack Kennedy did, that's in any way equivalent to any Republican president. Go ahead, make the case. I'm all ears.
No, I'm not. First of all, I'm not comparing either Kennedy.
That's
or
the
Johnson.
point. No, I'm saying that's the.
Don't interrupt me, friend. And now I have to go in 5 minutes for the stupid TV thing. Pete. There's very strong evidence there was all kinds of shenanigans, illegal shenanigans, that got John F. Kennedy elected president. Mayor Daley of Chicago may have done some crazy things, other states. Lyndon Johnson, all I would tell you is if anyone in this audience is listening to this podcast and you're ever in Austin, Texas, go to the Lyndon Johnson Museum there and listen to the phone calls that they have on record. Lyndon Johnson was, when he was in the Senate, was one of the dirtiest politicians in American history. And Pete, in his first political campaign, he literally...
I mean, I hear you. I'm not saying that either of those guys are angels. You're not hearing me. I'm going to be really clear. None of what the worst things that they did, and you, by the way, you had to go to Lyndon Johnson as a senator. You didn't name something while he was president, and you didn't name anything while JFK was president. You talked about how he got there. He may very well have got there by cheating using the mafia in Chicago and all that. I get it. I've read all about the Daily Machine. I'm telling you right now, let's not talk about it, because there is no equivalency, because those two things happened on Tuesday before 12 noon on Inauguration Day, and so much more. Every single day, there was so much criming, so much. And the idea that we would even talk about Democratic presidents past or future, they're not going to do those things, not on a regular basis. And if they do, they should be held responsible for them. And that's what's being done here.
Okay.
I love that you don't agree, but you had to give up because you have to go on TV. That's such a good feeling. Such a good feeling. And
I never want to be on the side of like defending Trump,
well,
which I'm not doing.
You're not. I don't think anybody says you're on the side of defending Trump. I think you're making a bit of a false equivalency with the potential, the past of the behavior of Democratic presidents while in office, much less the potential future of Democratic presidents. Also, we had Obama for 8 years.
So let's end on a serious point. It is my job as a constitutional law professor who studies American government, not just courts, American government, to suggest to you that it could be that the Republican Party today, and maybe for the last 30 years, has been in every way, on every issue I care about almost, horrifically worse than the other party. And Republican presidents have been miserably awful, from Nixon to Bush, right? Trump is the son of Bush. Reagan. We're only here because of Reagan. If it wasn't for Reagan, Trump doesn't get elected. Right. I agree with all of that.
Sure.
But it's my job to think about the institutional interest. That's my job over time. Your job is to do it today. My job is to think about America over time. Over time, Democrats have done some pretty horrific things, and there's every reason to think they'll do them again. And I want to make sure the procedures we set up for one man are procedures we would live with for every man or person. That's my job. So we have two different jobs, and that's fair.
You wrote a long piece. I know you got to go at Dorf. It's really important. If my mom is asking me, then a lot of people, she pays close attention to politics, I should say, but like con laws things, like my mom goes, what if that whole 14th Amendment Section 3 thing prevents Donald Trump from being president? Two very conservative legal experts wrote a very long piece, 126 pages. You deconstructed it. You don't agree. Everybody should read this.
Hold on. I didn't say I didn't agree. That's important, Pete. These two conservative fellow society law professors, one of whom, by the way, I wrote a law with at the Department of Justice. That's another story for another day. Oh. But anyway, these two conservative FedSoc professors wrote a 126-page opus to why Trump can never hold office again because he violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which says that, I'm summarizing, anyone who engages in insurrection or rebellion against the United States is disqualified from office. Well, there are about 50 unclear legal issues, including the fact that in 1869, these are originalists, by the way, these two law professors. In 1869, a judge of the Supreme Court, sitting on a different court, said, basically, this provision doesn't mean anything. You can't use it. So they spent 14 pages just figuring out that case. My only point was they asked all the wrong questions, and that's what's wrong with constitutional law.
Right.
The issue is not what the text or history means or shows. The issue is, and I'm channeling Judge Posner, and I'm sorry, Pete, but my 5-year, once-a-week exposure to Judge Posner hardened the views I already have, which is, we're talking about putting a former president in jail. We're talking about disqualifying the frontrunner for the GOP nomination. If we're going to do that, maybe we should. If we're going to do that, and there are counter arguments, those arguments need to be about today, not about 1869 or legal reasoning or originalism.
Right.
And Michael McConnell, who used to be a federal judge, Stanford law professor, and one of the first originalists in the 1970s in this country, famous scholar, thoughtful person. And by the way, one of the authors clerked for him. He wrote a piece criticizing that piece too. And what he said was, the way they interpret it, state clerks could disqualify people for federal office just by saying, I think you were involved in an insurrection, you're disqualified. That's a lot of power. And all Michael was saying, and I agree with this, is that's where the discussion should be. If he's disqualified, if we disqualify the president and a lot of other people too, everybody who plays and would storm the Capitol, if we disqualify all those people, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. But the answer is today's politics, today's world, today's government, today's president. It's not the fucking president in 1869.
Right. So what I'm hearing a lot in today's conversation is how big of a supporter of Donald Trump you've been. You've become a real Trumper.
Edit that last sentence out.
A real Trumper. Why are you wearing a Make America Great Again hat, too? That's really surprising. It does clashes with your shirt.
Because I was informed earlier this is only audio. I am not wearing it. No.
Yeah, that's why I said it. I can make you wear whatever I want. And
here's a tease for you.
The audio version.
Here's a tease for you, which you may not be interested or not. Maybe in our next discussion, we should ask what I should do if I walk into a 20-person class and 2 people are wearing MAGA hats in the front row.
Did that happen?
Didn't happen to me, but it happened to a bunch of law professors. They all took different tacks to it.
At law schools, students were wearing this. So this is a postgraduate school.
Some professors said you can't. Some professors said you can. And it's a fascinating issue, actually.
Oh, my gosh. Really? I just have jokes. I would make fun of them. I would be like, it's just a weird thing to say.
You can't do that, Pete, teaching con law in law school. You can't be partisan like that.
No, but it's not partisan. I would say it's a weird thing to go to law school and announce with an article of clothing what team you're on.
That's the point. And in a state law school, they have a right to do it. In a private law school,
you can. I don't think. Like, you're a student. You can wear whatever you want. You're not a lawyer. Whatever you want. It's just it's so pathetic that imagine a liberal coming in with a T-shirt that says "I'm a liberal." It would be equally stupid. Like you're in law school.
I don't think so. I think the real analogy would be someone coming in with a shirt that says "I love Karl Marx and America should be."
Fine, but fair enough. But the point is, law school should be about law, and law should be about argument. And arguments can't be made if I'm wearing a hat because no one's listening to me if I'm wearing this hat.
So some of the professors who had this issue said in seminars, especially. It was so disruptive that I couldn't carry on my class, which may have been true factually, because there are a lot of bleeding heart liberals but if they can't wear a Trump hat, then you can't wear a Hillary shirt. And then we get into all kinds of... Anyway, I didn't want to talk about this today. Okay. I wanted to tease it.
All right. Thank you, Professor Segall, as always.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, there you go. Eric Segall. Go let him know you heard him here. Follow him on TikTok and on X, Twitter. Listen to his podcast, Supreme Myths. Get his books. Always great. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of Stand Up. Tomorrow I should have Peter Bergen on the show, who's got a new podcast, national security expert, once interviewed Osama bin Laden, used to be a CNN regular, I know, and he's got a new podcast and book and all kinds of good stuff. Also, Nick Grossman, very, very smart guy, about what the media always gets wrong about Biden supporters. An article that went viral, so I invited him on to talk real quick. And more. Who else will be joining me this week? We will find out, if anybody. But getting back into the groove. Thank you very much for listening today, especially if you're still listening. You're the best bumblebees here at the end. That's all I've got for you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. John Carroll, take us out, as always.
Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. Stand up. Come on, 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 come on. Stand